I felt lost for so long, I didn't know there was a way out. I was looking for something that would make me happy. Here is my secret. Look, I'm a normal guy. This whole thing started when I really discovered why I was very unhappy. I was searching for that one thing, person, or experience that can make me feel truly alive. But when I looked into my shadow, I found that I could find true happiness. Sounds weird, but if I'm truly honest, I was never fully satisfied. In fact, I was repressed and stunted, almost coolly detached from anything and anybody. It started to turn into a restlessness and dissatisfaction. I only saw gray. Without a healthy channel to pursue, this started to come out in destructive ways, like overeating, which of course just created guilt and feelings of shame. I was indulging, yes. Instead of finding satisfaction inwardly, I started reaching for more experiences, possessions, women, anything to fill that hole inside. My energy started to dissipate in a million different directions, and I became cluttered with junk. Sometimes I just bought it on a whim and never really even used it. I detached from emotions and human relationships. Sometimes I felt cruel, even to those people who were vulnerable, like children. To top it off, I became insecure, projecting my issues onto other people. I hated this weakness within. Because I didn't know what I wanted out of life, I tried to fill myself with work, sometimes at the expense of health or even family. But at least constantly working distracted me. But I still felt empty, lost, and bitter. I started to burn out too. I felt powerless. I became a pushover with no personal boundaries, and others just walked right over me. I hated my job, but instead of moving on, I tried harder to be who everyone wanted me to be, only to take even more abuse. Honestly, I could have complained, but I started to enjoy the pain. I loved being the martyr. This bipolar shadow often worked against me. Sometimes I would even explode with aggressive, almost abusive behavior. I didn't even know there was a better way. I wondered to myself, is there light at the end of this tunnel? I started to develop a cynical detachment from other people. I was sitting at the center of the universe, and everything revolved around me. I started to destroy and tear down anything I could. Other people were just objects to exploit for my own gain. I'd push friends, family, and coworkers just to get what I wanted. I paid any price as long it was paid at the expense of other people. I secretly loved this opportunity to become the bully. I was controlling and cruel. But I started to see what I was missing. I started to discover that I didn't even know what I was doing or why I was doing it. Simply, I didn't know myself, my true self. And some people say you can do no greater harm. And that eventually brought balance. And it does for you too. But there's much more to it. Much, much more. You see, ever since I was young, I was always interested. Why? Some people, they seem so unhappy, so unfulfilled. Well, here's the reason. Life can feel like living with tunnel vision. always trying to get to the end. Most of the time, I felt completely boxed in. Even though sometimes there were moments of clarity, but there was also confusion, and that seemed to follow me around like a cloud, and it closed in from every side. But there was more. There is another way. Everything changed. I changed. My life changed. Almost in every way. I'll walk you through the whole process. I was lucky I was able to find a way to change. This is that story. Was I out of touch with myself? My real self? Why did I feel like I had so much potential but just couldn't seem to get there? Think I'm exaggerating? Well, I was caught up in how I thought I was supposed to act. Sometimes it was even a self-destructive pattern. I could get caught up in blind, mindless support, even when it was for something immoral or wrong. My mind was clouded over at times. No ethical reasoning could find its way into my heart. But there was more to it. There was much, much more. I discovered there's certain doorways to this comfortably numb life I was living. Gateways to hell, some call them, in a sense. Hell on earth. Hell in my life. That's what I mean by gateways to hell. Simply, we would all be wise to know when we're walking through these doorways. That bottomless pit. I want it all. Great things, great experiences, money, more and more. I can't get enough. And when I get it, it's never enough. The more I feed it, the more I crave. I became so focused on it that I started to distort my view of reality. For most of us, it can become an irrational urge. When you scratch that, it only brings momentary relief. The results of this striving simply ends in suffering, sickness, heartache, financial hardship, obsession, just to name a few. My own urge for happiness that was leading me to disaster. How can this be? My own will was leading me astray. I never got what I wanted exactly as I wanted it. My unfulfilled desires were leading me to anger. And of course, anger made me confused. Just think about a time when you tried to reason with someone who was upset and they just couldn't hear what you were saying, even if it was valid, even if it was true and helpful. To make it worse, I was so unhappy with things as they were. It was like expecting to get the carrot on the stick that would finally make me happy. So I became angry and confused all the time. That's one way I was living with a distorted reality. So when I became angry and confused from all of these unfulfilled desires, I started to repeat the same mistakes, as if I had forgotten the lessons of the past, the lessons of experience. But it only made me lust for more. I tried to make myself happy with physical pleasures, sex, food, anything in between. And sometimes, if I'm honest, it's like I couldn't even stop myself. I had this habit pattern, and it just started to take over. I felt like it took on a life of its own, and it was just dragging me, even against my own will. I couldn't stop myself. It was like I was infected by a disease of self-destruction, endlessly seeking for the next thing to make me happy, only to be let down and unfulfilled. Compulsively relying on mindlessly pleasuring myself. This is a bottomless pit I was bound to. It could never be filled. Like I said, the more I fed it, I just wanted more and more. I wondered, Is this leading me to a catastrophic explosion? I started to notice I was sacrificing my strength, my capacity to work, and health. It felt like I was sprinting towards death. But soon I learned, when that sunlight comes, a candle has no meaning. These momentary desires meant nothing when I found true happiness. So, an examined way of looking at it helped me be free from these confusions. What confusions? Well, I was losing perspective, acting unconsciously, unaware of the whole situation. I was infatuated with gratifying myself, thinking it would make me happy, and that was betraying the bigger picture. I would worry about superficial, insignificant things, and sometimes in my mind I would make them very big. Many of my thoughts were objectively unimportant, but they were everything to me. I made every little thing so important. So my will was driving me, and I was sitting in the passenger seat, and this was leading me towards this mindless action. Listen, when you're unregulated like this, uncontrolled, you just create chaos. It's misdirected energy. It strays us from what truly makes us happy, things that fulfill a real purpose. So we can use this passion to destroy yourself, but there is another way. Instead of mindlessly following after pleasures of the world, if it's directed, it makes abundance, it makes joy, it makes love. So use this desire for change as a tool and simply read the momentum and align yourself with harmony. But sometimes there's something in the way. When I didn't get what I wanted, I became angry, small-minded and scheming. I didn't even try to find a way to flow with what was happening around me, because sometimes those are new potentials. But I just unknowingly used that inner storm, this momentum, these feelings I had inside to destroy. And I wondered, can this be used intelligently? And why is it so often mismanaged? So when you have something that you want to change, instead of just getting angry about it, using that momentum and directing it towards positively changing that which created the anger in the first place. Look at it like this. Some say when a door closes, a window opens. This means that the challenges have an opportunity to be blessings in disguise. But if that's mismanaged, it's just like the pressure builds up and it just bursts out in haphazardous ways that are dangerous to you and the people around you. So when I was feeling this, when I would get angry, I failed to realize that this was almost like an announcement that I needed to change something. That anger is a reaction to being limited or feeling bounded in some way. So that's the trick, is to regulate that and to move that intelligently. If not, you might just explode on someone and unthinkingly harm something that's positive, instead of using that to overcome what needs to be overcome or let go of what needs to be let go of. For example, when we explode and harm others instead of perhaps expressing ourselves skillfully as a means of positive change. Some say that everything has a reason, and my anger was there for a reason. But I looked at myself very mathematically, and I started to understand the cause of my anger. There was a chain of events that created it. It wasn't just created by happenstance, but in my anger, this inner storm, I started boiling over into insanity. I started to misdirect that pressure into life, to wrong things, to people, to situations. I wondered if my anger held the power to dissolve something I needed to change. When it surged inside me, I often used it in the wrong direction. For example, I would harm relationships that were good or things that mattered and use resources that were best used elsewhere instead of using it for positive change and transformation and eliminating the cause of that error. I could have simply realized this inner storm was an opportunity. Instead of being like a sheep and going with this destructive tendency, I could listen to its fundamental dislike of the situation and skillfully change what was appropriate. This is about applying the proper pressure and change or growth and eliminating the cause of that anger. Instead of exploding and butchering everything, I can simply do what needs to be done. Use this signal of pain and anger as a catalyst or motivation for change, intelligently seeing what needs to be done. Anger, this inner storm, a spark to our potential, a surge of energy to destroy anything that its way of experiencing harmony, creating and maintaining and destroying properly, protecting and transforming your universe, using that fire to slay inner demons. I thought I needed to change myself, to evolve, to use my attitudes and actions more harmoniously. Change my very self. So if anger was a sign that something needs to change, something is in the way of harmony in my life, then what should I do about it? I started a journey of sitting with it and exploring it. Where did it come from? Why is it here? What is the reason I'm upset? And what is the best thing to do about it? It's not that people or situations, they deserve my anger and I should just unleash it on them. There's somewhere different where you can direct that feeling intelligently. This is much more productive than just reacting unconsciously, which often does more harm than good. So trying this, I unraveled a few mysteries, which I will share with you. But it only happened when I developed that level of self-awareness and that willingness to explore. Self-awareness? What is my shadow? Life is happening all around us, and fear can be a reaction to things taking their course. It can be your reaction to something new to you. It's often a default reaction when you're not ready, aware, or have the capacity to align with the change. When you're ready for the weather, you might react to it more skillfully. For example, let's imagine that clouds are coming, but you've never experienced the rain. In this example, you don't know what rain is. Being confronted with that unknown to a new situation, you may react in many ways, some for good and some for bad. In this example, you don't know how nature works. You don't understand the nature of things. So you just react and do things that may not be harmonious with the environment, with the weather. You could even hurt yourself or others, like getting wet, cold, and sick. It's also possible to be more mindful and to coexist with change, to ride the waves. Then you can use a potential challenge for good. As you know, in your life, clouds will come. They have a purpose. The water needs to come. Change happens with or without your consent. But fear is often a misunderstanding and a corresponding reaction towards what's happening. Through understanding the nature of things, you're not afraid. Don't discount it or dismiss it. Don't deny it, but also don't fearfully react and become unnerved. It's simple what I'm saying here. People have fear in relationships because they don't understand them. People have fear about the future because there's still doubt. They're not skillful with what they feel is going to happen. People have fear about money because they're not skillful with it. So the opposite is true. If you understand these things, it eliminates the fear and you act more coherently. People say the sun rises and sets, but it doesn't. It's merely out of their sight. What brings suffering and what brings liberation? True freedom, internal freedom. Here's how I discovered that some are living with a bias of fear, greed, and anger. They're left disheartened and out of tune with what's good for them. That which would guide them through joyful evolution. I could picture times in my life when I was overwhelmed with emotion and desire, arms and legs heavy, my hair standing on end with hands shaking, my mind whirling, barely able to see reason. I would beat myself up internally, sometimes even falling out of touch with myself so I could no longer follow that small, quiet voice within, that voice of my conscience that acts like a guiding light. Sometimes this better judgment inside would internally tell me what to do and what not to do, but it's easier done sometimes than said. So here's how you do it. It was much different than I thought. While some focus on intellectual debate or speculation, I wanted to understand it from a scientific perspective. This practical process for raising this self-awareness, deep wisdom, and eventually going beyond even that. This path can be walked, and there's a science to liberating your soul from suffering, but it's hidden from most. It is a secret, not because it's hidden exactly, but because so few are prepared to hear it. Here is what I discovered.
Hey, it's Ryan here. Thank you so much for your love and support. It's truly, truly overwhelming and appreciated. I invite you to share this series with your friends and support the channel. This story is my way of adding value and serving this world. It's about decoding the wisdom passed down through the wisdom traditions of the world. This story is about how we can walk together, heart in hand, and work to lift each other up. From dark to light, from suffering to liberation, from unreal to real. Let me know what you think in the comment section below and what's going on in your life. I just might make a video about it. And again, thank you for everything you do. And I invite you to support this channel. It's everything we can do to help this world be a better place.